I was born at an early age in a private hospital in Sydney, and I don't remember much about that day. And I'm 82 now. They didn't think I'd live, so I was baptised 3 times. The nurse baptised me, the doctor came and thought maybe she didn't do it properly, so he did it. Then the priest came and he thought maybe they didn't do it properly, so he did it. My parents, Dad was Charles Patrick John. He was a cartographer originally with the Lands Office, and then he was moved to Hay, where I grew up, as the Crown Land Agent. Mum never worked outside the house. They had 6 kids. I was the 5th, 3 boys, 3 girls. One of my brothers ended up under a tractor at one stage and broke his pelvis, and Dad insisted on peace and quiet. The radio was only ever turned on at 7 p.m. for the news, never any other time. We lived outdoors. We went rabbit shooting or trapping, and that was our pocket money, the rabbit skins. Went swimming at Madman's Beach in Hay. You weren't invited to the Hay Club at all, unless you were saddleback. St Mary's Hay. Presentation nuns were the only teachers. Some kid got into trouble for calling them black and white magpies. Played a lot of sport. We all had bikes, of course, and we'd have one mob down one end of the playground and one down the other end and ride through and try and get the others off their bike. I came as a boarder to Forbes, and the boarders lived in Mercedes there with the brothers, and there was a brother who was a bit keen on the cane, and he got moved. So he came to us during tea to give his farewell speech, and he used to talk like that, and he said, "I'm going down to kill more." And we all laughed our heads off. That was the end of his speech. In 1956 they opened Red Bend, and I was one of the first students there. I was in the cadet band and got a cup for the best bugler of 1953. And it turned up just a few years ago, and my niece read the inscription and she said, "Oh, the best bungler of 1953. And my faith really came from Mum and Dad. We had to say the rosary after the main meal of an evening, even before washing up. Rosary came first. Mum and Dad were always faithful at Mass, and I was an altar server from an early age. When I was in secondary school, and one day Bishop Fox turned up and I was called out of class. I'd been writing to this Columban priest who served in China. And Tom Fox, before he said hello to me, he said, "What's this I hear about you becoming a Columban? In case you don't know, you're on for my diocese. I pointed the finger at you when you were in the cradle." As a matter of fact, when I was in Year 5 in Hay, Bishop Fox called into the school and he was talking about vocations then. That's when the idea first came to mind. And when I was leaving school, of course, I had to think about all these things. I was thinking about becoming a physicist, but then I decided no. It's the priesthood I want to join. Well, we did our philosophy in Springwood and our theology in Manly. We had our lessons in the footy, and their boilers were powered by timber. So I was on the wood party to bring in the timber, and we'd saw them up with cross-cut saws, chop them down with axes, and split them with wedges. Of course, come back in to be dirt all through your hair and everything, so I pinched a white beret from my sister and used that when I was going on the wood party. And one of the other students saw it and said, "White beret, you related to Lord Montgomery?" I said, "Yeah, second cousin." He believed it, the silly twit, so everyone called me Monty from there on. And most of the older priests in the diocese call me Monty, even still. I was ordained in 1964 at St Paul of the Cross in Dulwich Hill. And after the ceremony, Kevin Murphy, who was a couple of years older than me, he came and said, "It was all invalid." He mumbled all the way through. I said, "Well, you stick around. If ever I want to get out, I want to witness." Bishop Warren was ordained bishop a week after I was ordained priest. Broken Hill, there was the main building and the cottage, and then they had a little tin shed with 2 rooms. And the future Bishop Bill Brennan of Wagga, he was in one room and I was in the other, and the walls thumped with heat. That was all right until some cat got in the ceiling and they had a litter, then it stank to high heaven. At that stage in 1965, there were 12 priests in Broken Hill. I had 4 parishes. We'd all do the liturgies and the hospital, and I was a chaplain for the YCW, Young Christian Workers Movement. Loved it. My first time on the hospital, there's a bloke in a padded cell wants to see the priest. Padded cell? You know, for those that are out of control. So I went to go into the cell and they took me cigarette lighter and me cigarettes and anything else I had on me. But he was quite harmless, actually. He'd every now and again go off his medication and go troppo. The high school there had 2,000 kids. Anyway, I was down at the high school one day and there was 4 of us. We had about 50 kids in each class. Half the population of the high school were Catholic. I'm at the door and the kids are lining up to go into the class, and this kid roars up from the back and said, Father, I think I believe in God. I said, oh, very good. Tell me what you reckon next week. The following week he came past, he looked at me, he said, false alarm, Father, false alarm. You practically needed a whip and a lion tamer to be in the RE classes, as they call them at high school. And coming to Forbes, it was so much more gentle, really. 4 years in Broken Hill, 4 years in Forbes. You take a year to get to know the place a bit, and second year to sort of plan what to do, and third year to sort of do a bit, and fourth year, you know, just a bit of icing on that. So Hillston was the next appointment. Mount Hope was an interesting place. There's nothing there, of course, except a pub. You go to Mass there, and both the licensee and his wife were Catholic. So we go down to the saloon room and we'd have Mass. And the licensee would get someone from the other side of the bar to look after the customers. I was halfway through Mass reading the Gospel. This bloke came roaring down the passageway and flung the door open and said, how much are soft drinks? But for someone to buy a soft drink in Mount Hope was a bit beyond him, you see. Collection that day consisted of one $5 note, there was a leg of lamb, there were some vegetables, and a couple of jars of pickles. Some of them were so poor up there, you wouldn't even go and have a meal with them. It'd be just too much on them. That's how barren some of that country was there. What do I love most about it? You're involved in people's lives, from baptisms and weddings and funerals and schools and everything in between, sort of thing. And if I've been able to help anyone, it's great. Yes, I've enjoyed my priesthood. I was transferred from Hillston to Brewarrina. I'd have to go up to Lightning Ridge each Sunday to get enough money to live on. The blokes up there decided that we should sort of build a little flat there for the priests because there was no accommodation in Lightning Ridge. So some bloke donated an opal to be raffled. It's for Unwin's shack at Lightning Ridge. So I was walking downtown one day on the opposite, and he put his head out the door and said, what's this about Unwin shacking up at Lightning Ridge? I said, no, Unwin's shack at Lightning Ridge. Oh, well, he sold more bloody tickets than anyone else. Lightning Ridge was a fascinating place. It was an escape hole at that stage. People escaping from immigration or wives or cops or whatever. They had something like 900 on the roll, and the cops did an unofficial survey and counted 7,000 people. Most grateful for my family. I asked Mum and Dad one time why we never went on holidays, why Dad never had a car. And Dad said, well, if we feed you kids properly and educate you properly, you can do all that when you grow up. So it was that sort of inspiration. And then Doug Warren, to me, he was the epitome of what a bishop should be. He was down to earth. He had a great knowledge of all the old people of the different parishes and would go and visit them whenever he came to the parish. I was in Brewarrina one night with him and we were walking down the street, and this Aboriginal bloke was coming towards us, and Doug said hello to him. And he said to me, who's that? I said, I don't know, you spoke to him. He said, how are you going to get to know someone if you don't talk to them? Which was a great inspiration for me, really.